All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching the special coverage of the 2023 off-cycle elections in Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa State right here on Trust TV. We're bringing you feelers from the field and also analysis and perspectives with special guests right here in the studio. And we have Emmanuel Osemeka, public affairs analyst, joining us this time for some more perspectives on what's happening, and also with our eyes on the ground, as well as other civil society organizations that we are collaborating with. We have Emmanuel Njoku, the Director, Democracy Governance of Code. He is in Kogi, who will be joining shortly also to give us what the assessments are so far as we speak. We also have Mardia. Thank you so much. Mardia is joining us on the set also for some of the analysis that we'll be bringing to you this morning. Well, a lot of expectations, Emmanuel, on this election so far. A lot of people are hoping that this is going to be free, fair, and credible, as been promised by the authorities, the police, INEC, and so on. What are your expectations as we go on with these elections today?
Well, I mean, given the public perception of the 2023 general election, and of course the associated quote and unquote disappointment, if you hear left and right, you see that the confidence is very low. INEC naturally, based on natural justice, is expected to try as much as possible to make a statement with these elections, these three off-cycle elections. In the past, these elections were never held together. It's usually one after the other. So there must be a reason for making the three happen on the same day. And of course, there are quite a lot of number of peculiarities with these three states. And so the stakes are pretty high. Then additionally, the fact that this is the first election to be superintended by the new tinubu administration, the new Inspector General, the new Chief of Defense Staff, the new National Security Advisor, the new everything. So the stakes...
Except the INEC chair.
Unfortunately. Well, INEC might want to also show that they've repented. I use that word advisedly. Yeah. Because I use that word because it's not about promises. A lot of promises were made before the 2023 elections, and those promises were thrown away. I mean, not just through the window, they were thrown through the door. And nobody has been held accountable for it so far. Nobody has come to apologize to Nigerians. So sometimes when we see government do certain things deliberately, we sort of perceive it as a sort of apology, because they know they've done something wrong here, but they will not come out to own and say, oh, this is what has. So clearly, as the day goes by, we want to see that level of deliberate effort to, one, show up confidence amongst the electorate, show up confidence among Nigerians, show up confidence, both from the security agencies to INEC staff, and of course every stakeholders. But of course, the only people I know that will never ever change is the politicians.
So what's your assessment of what's going on so far at the different polling units in Bayelsa, Imo, and of course Kogi State?
Well, it's still early in the day, yes. Though I know in some years past, you may have heard one heavy skirmish here and there. But I want to believe that the changes that were made to the Electoral Act, which we're also beginning to see a lot of gaps, has made the politicians to also understand clearly that however they try to exploit the loopholes or the gaps identified, the electorates have a say.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go to Emmanuel Njoku and be reminded that I have two Emmanuels as guests this morning, so I need to be very specific. I have Emmanuel Njoku, the Director of Democracy Governance Code, who is in Kogi right now.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Emmanuel Njoku.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. So, what latest do we have as far as the Kogi elections are concerned in terms of what you've observed and some of the numbers that we are having this morning?
I didn't get that. I didn't hear you.
What are the latest right now from Kogi State as far as what you have observed from between yesterday and today, the deployment, the logistical arrangements, and so on, and the numbers that we are seeing?
Okay, well, just so to state that we are not just in Kogi to observe the Kogi election. So this is more like our situation room covering Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo State, as we have observers in the 3 states where election is ongoing right now. So for Kogi State, where I am, and I was in the field, so far, Kogi State polls opened early enough, and we could tell that polls will open early enough because as of yesterday, around 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, I was in about 2 INEC rack centers. One of them was the Crowder Memorial College, Ward 1A. Then I was in another one, St. Mary Rack Center. And as at 8:30, 9 o'clock, all the SPUs had already distributed the sensitive and non-sensitive materials to the presiding officers, meaning that as at 8 o'clock, as at 9 o'clock, they had done their refresher course for the beavers, and they had also distributed the material. So what that means is that they were ready as at 9 o'clock. So we already anticipated that polls will open early today in Kogi, and that's exactly what we've witnessed. Polls opened early, INEC officials arrived, polling units early. And so on Friday, we were at the CBN headquarters to inspect the sensitive materials with the resident electoral commissioner, and he told us his strategy is to, so in Kogi State, there are some wards and places that in Lokoja, local government area, for instance, there are some wards that are as far as 8 hours distance before you can get to such local government areas. So what the strategy direct did was that he deployed first sensitive materials to Lokoja so they can sort it out and start taking them to those places that are as far as 8 hours from the local government secretariat in Lokoja. So in Kogi State so far, polls opened early, INEC officials arrived early. So far, it has been peaceful. So far, there has not been any serious cases of threat of violence, even though in one particular polling unit in Ajokuta, one open space somewhere in Ajokuta, one of our observers was actually threatened by security personnel not to take pictures, and but so disappointedly, that is coming from security personnel, not even from thugs, who should understand better the role of civil society and the role of election observers, as we have the right to take pictures and take images so they can fit our situation room, and then we can put it out there for the world to see. But so far, so good, enough security on ground. In fact, more than enough security. I always tell people that in Kogi State, the police said they are deploying 40,000 personnel. That's quite a lot. And if you remember, the general election in 2023 general election, the police deployed, security personnel deployed 400,000 personnel. So deploying 10% of that number to a Kogi State that just has about 3,508 polling units against the 400,000 that was deployed to 176,000 polling units tells you that there is more than enough security on ground. So we are hoping that citizens will come out and vote. We can't tell exactly if the voter turnout is high or low at this time, because you can't tell, since elections will be on till 2:30. But we are hoping that citizens will feel confident with the assurance and presence of police to come out to vote.
So there's no excuse now not to have a safe, free process, isn't it?
So yes, you're very right. There's no excuse whatsoever. And just to buttress that point, that there's no excuse. In usual elections, like we saw in 2023 general election, every state had one resident electoral commissioner in every state. But for this election in Kogi, Imo and Bayelsa, INEC deployed 9 resident electoral commissioners to each of these states. So if you include the resident electoral commissioner, that's the rec for the state, that makes it 10 resident electoral commissioner. This is actually not new. in the past, for off-cycle elections, INEC usually deploy some resident electoral commissioners, but usually just see them deploying 2 or 3 recs. But in this very situation, in these elections, INEC deployed 9 extra resident electoral commissioners. So that's to say that every of these 3 states, they have 10 resident electoral commissioners to support and oversight the resident electoral commissioner of the state. So really, there's no reason why INEC should fail in this election, because so far we've seen that they are prepared in their deployment, in their preparations, in their logistics, and we are hoping that the presiding officers and the poll clerks at the polling units will do the needful, and so that we'll have a successful election today.
So, Mr. Njoku, let me just put this question. I know that INEC would say that the election is supposed to commence as early as possible. Sensitive materials have been deployed to different polling units. But we saw what happened in the general elections and also the governorship elections earlier this year, where sensitive materials were distributed, but election didn't commence. I mean, voting didn't commence until later date. Are we experiencing something like that in Kogi State from the observation that you've had, going through some of the polling units this morning?
Well, so far, we've not experienced any of that. We've not gotten any report of that. Even on social media, we've not seen that. So far, in Kogi State particularly, INEC officials came early. Accreditation and voting started early, within 8:30 to 9 a.m. Close to 70% of polling units where we have our observers on ground reported that polls were opened and started as at 8:30 a.m. this morning. So nothing of such has been seen. Where we saw a bit of a bit of late arrival and slow opening of polls, and in some cases,
all right, let's come back to the studio just to be on standby, Emmanuel Njoku. Let's come to Emmanuel Semeka in the studio. Why do you think that we're seeing this kind of massive deployments, perhaps not like we've seen before in this election?
I clearly mentioned to you, I mean, I didn't know about this massive deployment before I made that statement that INEC will try as much as possible to make a statement with this election. Though the totality of the events that will follow is not entirely in their hands. So INEC does not have the powers to control thugs or ballot snatching and what have you, but they have control of following these letters of the Electoral Act and the Constitution, and of course their guidelines. So if they do that, of course, that's when you can clearly say that yes, INEC did their job without any form of compromise, or I mean, there will be no need for a debate whether they are neutral or they're not neutral. So I believe clearly that, if you recall, during the week, there's been this accusation and counter-accusation of the REC being compromised, or the REC should be changed, or the REC should not be changed. So I believe, instead of saying, change REC and bring another, you know what? Let the 10 of them go in there, sit down, supervise the election together. I mean, it will take a lot to get 10 people to compromise for one person. It will take a whole lot for that to happen. And don't also forget the Adamawa situation. So that is still fresh in the minds of so many Nigerians. It took, some level of courage for INEC to stamp their feet and say, you know what, this is wrong, that cannot happen. Because that's an aberration. It's completely against the constitutional provisions, that for the resident electoral commissioner, who is not the returning officer, too, because I mean, you have REC, you have returning officers who are appointed. Is the returning officer that should make the proclamation or the pronouncement, So clearly, I believe from the feelers, from court judgment, I believe INEC must have done some level of introspection and seen that Nigerians are complaining in this area. Nigerians have accused us of this and that, in order to show, because justice, like the lawyers will say, must not just be done, it must be seen. So I believe with this massive deployment, you can say, I mean, not just INEC, police, 40,000 personnel in one state. Come on.
I mean, we talk about also 15 commissioners of police in one state.
So you could see how deliberate the government is about these particular elections.
So don't you think that, with all of this, we're going to see some sort of voter apathy, and also, some people asking that, why do we have so many securities? Is there a problem? Is that a foreseen problem that we do not know about?
Oh, there has been foreseen problems in Kogi State, in Imo State most especially. I think amongst the three states, Bayelsa has been the most, relatively peaceful state. I mean, citizens, market women, you talk to them, both APC, PDP people agree that Bayelsa in the last 3.5 years have been largely very peaceful. Unlike Imo State, that is one day, in fact, one morning, one afternoon, one evening. That's for Imo State. In Kogi State, we've had issues of kidnapping, political thuggery, and all kinds of things. I think amongst the three states, it is Kogi State that has one of the biggest challenge in terms of, because for Kogi State and Imo State, for example, you have a situation where you had the incumbent government suppressing the opposition. They have 18, in Kogi State, they have 18 political parties who fielded candidates. Besides the ruling party, none of those other parties were giving any of the state's facilities to use for campaign. None. They had to use the street, byways, corner places, and all that. That's against the law.
Isn't that peculiar with most of the elections? But even in the Federal Capital Territory, we've seen that happen.
But it's against the law. For the Federal Capital Territory, they may decide not to allow you use Eagle Square for whatever pecuniary reasons, but they will allow you use at least the Old Parade Ground.
Or the Moshood
Abiola Stadium. Or even the Velodrome, which is still fair enough. But in Kogi State, you can't use school, you can't use fields, you can't use stadiums, you can't use some beautiful places that even the government, if I were the incumbent government, you did something. It's an opportunity for you to let them see the beautiful things you've done. But you want them not to destroy it. If there's any destruction, you surcharge them for it.
All right, let's go to Emmanuel Njoku. Emmanuel, one other important thing to observe is the participation of other demography in the election, talking about young people, talking about people living with disability, and so on. What have you observed as of now this morning? Unfortunately, we can't hear you. Can you unmute? Aha. All right, so you can go ahead now. It appears that you are muted. We can't hear you.
You could.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah. So far in a particular polling unit, I'm not very sure of the name right now, but we've observed that the poll clerks are observing the priority voting rule of INEC. Yeah. So we understand that old people, elderly people are being given priority to vote first in this polling unit. And so far, that's the much we've observed in one particular polling unit. So we believe, like we observed in the general election, which most of the presiding officers give priority to elderly people, pregnant women, and people who live with disability. We want to believe that that has become a norm, and that the presiding officers will do the needful in all the polling units across these three states where election is holding.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Emmanuel Njoku, for that. We would continue to keep tab on what's happening there. From time to time, we'll call you for some more updates. We appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, Emmanuel Njoku, the Director, Democracy Governance of Code, who is joining us from their own situation room in Kogi State. Well, back in the studio, Emmanuel. Again, Emmanuel.
So we have two Emmanuel here, and it's kind of conflicting things. But we now understand this is Emmanuel.
So one thing that we've seen from the number of the candidates that are contesting for the elections in all the states, in the three states, over 50 candidates, across the three states, only 3 women. And that's something that people have been talking about as regards the women's participation in politics. Are we experiencing a decline here?
No, absolutely we are. I mean, if you recall from the Beijing conference, where they came up with a 35% affirmative action, to a very large extent, I think it was Obasanjo's government, where the 35% affirmative action was adhered to or implemented largely with the MDAs, but of course at the ministerial level you had quite a sizable number of women. After that, you had the Jonathan administration, which also had some reasonable number of women. At least he went above 35%, probably about 40%. After that, it was as if we threw away the participation of women in politics, but even the participation of women and giving women opportunity to even vie. Then, of course, recently we went from expression of interest form and, of course, application form at 5 million, 2.5 million, we went from there to 100 million. How many women in politics can afford 50 million for, is it application form or there's a expression of interest and
the form,
the nomination form. So, ab initio, the women were already disadvantaged financially, because a lot of the women who have the financial muscle, if you check them out, they are not interested in politics. They are at best technocrats. Most of them are interested in, you guys win the election, call us to come do the job for you. So they are not interested in investing their money that way. But those women who are neck deep in politics do not have that financial muscle to even buy nomination forms, how much more raising funds to run the tedious and very monetized primary campaigns and, of course, the general campaign. So the best, most often you will see, no matter how popular these particular women are, is either to get them as running mates.
Is there any reason why we are seeing that you have two of the candidates in Bayelsa alone, one in Kogi and then none in Imo State? Does this has any correlation with the political temperature, if you like, in Imo and Kogi State?
I believe so. It's not to also say that there were no women who vied at the primary level. There were women who vied, but they didn't stand any chance, amidst these gladiators. I mean, take a case in point, River State. We have the Honorable Minister of the FCT, who was then the governor of River State, come out openly to say that he personally bought all the forms and gave the forms to the people that vied for the primaries. And of course, you know how that primary went and the fallout of that primary eventually. He boasts about it, not just the governorship, but for the State House of Assembly, the House of Representatives, the Senate, and of course, the governorship. He bought all the forms and distributed it himself. That's what our politics have become. So the question first is that correct? Is that legal? Is it allowed for one person to procure all forms and decide to give it to whoever? So at what point is the individual expressions expressed in that manner?
Well, isn't this the fault of the political party first? Because if
Absolutely.
the political party has the interest of women, and then we should be seeing more women clinching this ticket and vying for political positions in a very, very important political position that could change the narrative.
I agree with you. That is why it's important that we must continue to push for democracy to be deepened at the political party level, because leadership recruitment process must first of all be correct before you can even talk about the general election. Look at for APC, for example, their presidential nomination fund was 100 million. How many women were able to afford that? Just one. That's the current Women Affairs Minister, right? And in the past, they gave the tickets free to women. So what changed? The reality is that the political temperature in Nigeria is tilted against the women, both at the political party level. Because if you look at the leadership of the political parties across board, you find out that women leadership is given to women only. I heard at some point said the way woman leader is given to a man.
So aside all of this, do you think that, we're talking about competence now? Because even if these forms are given to women, I remember some of the chairmen of the political parties prior to the presidential election talking about, if you give these forms free, how would you appreciate the fact that you're vying for a presidential position and also governorship position? Do you think that, competence now come to play, regarding all of this?
So that is one of the challenges we have at the political party level, because first off, we must first get the right leadership at the political level. If a leader or the chairman of the political party has such assertions or mindset about women, then something foundationally something is wrong with that political party. There are too many very competent women, in fact, more competent than men. Women are not like men. Women are more focused than men. They don't get easily distracted like men. And they don't have that, physical muscle to flex around. So the women prefer to, express intellectual strength than physical strength. So in most cases, go and check the performance of Obasanjo's government. The successes recorded, go and check. You will attribute them to women. The Honorable Minister of the Finance at the time was a woman. The Madam Due process that we have today, the due process, procedures we have today came from the leadership of a woman. Go to Jonathan's government, likewise. So when you check the performance of our women, in political sphere, you find out that they've actually done better than the men. Professor Dora Akunyili, since she left NAFDAC, is no longer the same. NAFDAC is not the same. I'm not trying to indict anybody, but that's a reality.
But we are also seeing the level that, Moji Sola Adeyeye is going.
She's doing the best she can under the circumstances. But you see, there's something that comes with some, like you talked about competence. So I'm speaking clearly to competence that is backed up with passion, patriotism, zeal, desire to perform and deliver. Women have shown time and time again that they can do much better. Well,
let's continue to get the updates from Bayelsa. We have Friday Imo Boy and also Jonathan Awanya, who are there. Our eyes on the ground. We'll be getting updates shortly from them. We also have Ajibade Praise in Imo, who we expect to get updates from shortly as well. But for now, we understand that the Bayelsa Deputy Governor, Senator Lawrence Erujapo, is addressing journalists after voting. He called on security agencies to do the needful so that citizens should not be disenfranchised. He equally thanked Bayelsans for the opportunity to serve the state. So you can imagine what it means for the deputy governor there. He is also the running mate of the incumbent governor, who is seeking re-election in the state in person of Due Diri. Also, we understand that the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, has also casted his vote in that state. A lot of expectations are coming from that quarters, especially given the fact that he is the former president. People are talking about whether or not he would have some kind of influence.
And he also went on to address the press after casting his votes as well. So a lot of press briefing there after casting a vote.
As expected.
As expected, but a lot of people would just expect that, you cast your vote and wait for, collation and see who becomes the governor.
Well, so let's take a look at what, they said. Okay.
I also want to thank God for their privilege to come for this second contest. And I again want to use the opportunity to thank the party and the governor who nominated me as his running mate, because it's not my right, it's a privilege. So I want to thank them. Again, I want to thank Bayelsans for the 4 years of massive support and solidarity. And finally, I want to thank the people of the Phony community who have always been behind me, the solid rock behind me, like the Rock of Gibraltar. And you can see how massive the people are here. Even the presidential elections and the national assembly elections, the turn-up was not as much as this. And I told you people that because it was not my election. I know there's always emotion and sentiment to politics everywhere it is. So we have seen a massive turnout. So we thank Annex also for the process so far, but we are concerned about what is happening in Nembe and a few other places. We pray that the security agencies and all the other agencies involved will do the right thing so that people should not be disenfranchised. Election is a ballot affair, not a bullet affair. All of them have 6 as their letters, but that doesn't mean that they are the same words. Bullet and ballot have 6 letters, but it doesn't mean that they're the same words. So people should make it a civic responsibility, not a military responsibility. So I want to encourage the Bayelsa people, the Nembe people, who have always had this cliche. For every electoral circle, there's always a violence in Nembe. I think they are becoming a little bit too kind a name for them to bear. So we want to plead with all the actors and actresses, because it's not only actors, the actresses there. They should shield the sword and allow peace to reign. We are confident that we are going to close to victory, because the candidate of the other party have actually wanted to tell us. He was here for 5 years, and all we could hear is that I will do again. He said it was 45 years and said it was too young. I think we are comfortable and confident, and the process is going on smoothly here. And I encourage everybody to remain peaceful and law-abiding.
First, let me congratulate the 3 states that have elections today: Bayelsa State, Imo State, and Kogi State, and which all the states successful elections, peaceful conduct of elections. But basically, because this is an off-season election, and I get worried about the issue of off-season elections, and I will use this unique opportunity to plead with the National Assembly that we need to block this off-season election. It's very odd. It's not a global best practice. A country can elect their people at different times, like America. Some countries they may not elect everybody at the same time. But any time they go on to conduct their election, they elect everybody that's supposed to be elected. If we continue with this trend of off-season elections, based on the interpretation of our laws by the judicial officer, to come to a time the presidential election in Nigeria may be off-season. Probably that's the time that all of you media people and others should be worried. Look at the American system. Everybody knows when the American elections will be conducted. That's standard practice in other countries. When I say presidential election in Nigeria may be off-season one day, some people may say, why, how? It almost happened in 2007. I contested as a running mate to late President Yaradua. You know that election. The 7 judges that presided over the case, 3 of them, in their own judgment that the election be annulled, 4 of them sustained the election. And that is why we stayed. If one has crossed over, by now the presidential election in Nigeria would have been off-season election. And it is not the best for a country. And there are easy things to do to make sure that other states, now we have 7 states that are off-season. We need to stop there, and where possible, these 7 states too can be migrated back to fall in line with the other states, and the National Assembly can do that. That is my message for the National Assembly, my message for Nigerians today. On the other hand, I wish the election successful. I've been monitoring what is happening in Bayelsa State. I almost ask people across the local governments, and for now, no major things that will get worried, apart from the part of Nembe local government, the Basambri part of Nembe local government that have been in conflict for quite some time before the election. Apart from that, I think the elections are going on well, but we cannot conclude until at the end of the voting period.
All right, there you have former President Goodluck Jonathan there giving an address after casting his vote in Otokwe, his local government, I believe. And did you see the former First Lady there?
Exactly.
Mama P.
Mama P. We miss it.
I mean, for the first time in a very long time in the public, I'm seeing her looking all fresh and all.
Yeah, I think she paid a visit to the villa not so long ago, and she was looking all fly. Okay. It's just very, very, overwhelming to see her coming out and looking so beautiful after being the First Lady of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. It's nice to see her.
All right, some very salient points made by the former president there, talking about the off-cycle elections and how that is not the best, you know, for democracy and all that. The former president is making submission as to whether we can be able to, you know, go back to the norm, you know, having all these elections conducted at the same time. Because I for one, I see how the nature of the off-cycle election has a tendency to influence the outcome of the elections. So, for instance, you think about all the other offices, electoral offices in the states have been concluded. The state assemblies, the members of the National Assembly, senators, House of Reps members have all, you know, been concluded in all the various states, and it's just that seat of the governor that gets to be decided. So, in some way, it has a way that it's going to impact, isn't it?
So, I mean, you're absolutely correct, because just like you have the presidential election having just one single constituency, which is the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as a whole, 774 local government, and of course over 600 and something thousand polling unit, right? So you come to the governorship. So subject to whatever number of local government you have in each state, for example, Kogi, I think it's 21 local government or thereabout. Of course, don't forget that the off-season elections, off-cycle elections started with the Anambra P2B's conundrum. When Dr. Chris Ngige was declared winner in 2003, then of course P2B then of APGA went to the tribunal, from tribunal all the way to Supreme Court, and 3 years and 2 months after he became governor. And of course when he became governor, less than 4 months into his administration, he was impeached. Then he came back after 2 months. Then, of course, immediately after he came back, I think a week or two after, INEC was already preparing to do election for the next government, because to INEC at the time, he was just going to complete the remaining 8 months or thereabout of the Chris Ngige. He went back to Supreme Court to interpret I think it was Section 135 or Section 188 at the time, before those amendments took place. And of course, Supreme Court came out and said that your tenure starts from the day you take the oath of office. So that's how this off-season election began. Then from, of course, Anambra, we went to Osun, from Osun to Edo and Ekiti. Then, of course, the rest of them began. I'm not very sure the direction or the thinking of former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, but I believe that maybe he was, if I can postulate that probably he's considering the cost of this election. The cost associated with these 3 elections is humongous, is mind-boggling. So if you just oppose it to the fact that elections held in these states just some few months back. So the question is, why can't you also hold the governorship election? It doesn't mean that they will be sworn in in May, during the May 29, whatever. They can still, the incumbent, if he didn't win, can still hold sway pending when his tenure. I don't know how they're going to do it, but legislatively there are things you can, work out. But I also don't know how you want to do about a 4-year tenure to expire in less than 4 years. So if, for example, if you say all the elections should hold the same day, even if they've just been in office for 2 years, or they've just been in office for 3 years, whereas the Electoral Act says the election must not hold earlier than or not more than. So I think subject to that. So they need to look at this whole gamut and see how they can come about, but trust politicians.
And perhaps maybe this is where issues that have been raised, such as inaugurations should not take place until all electoral matters are concluded. Because I see that the courts are very, very key in this whole conversation.
Yes.
Part of why we are experiencing this, like you mentioned, is that the court made rulings. Most importantly, the court made rulings that disrupted the whole thing and everything, and then we have to go back and so on. So it's very important then that the INEC, for instance, follows through with the processes, not leaving anything to the courts to decide. So that at the end of the day, you don't have courts upturning elections and changing things, and then it leads to more states now going to the off-cycle. Like in Imo, for instance, Imo was the last state to join this list of states that are having off-season elections and so on. So perhaps the issue of not having inaugurations until electoral matters are decided or petitions are decided upon, it's important in this regard.
Yes, absolutely. And that is also, I also think that's why he was talking about that one day, if we continue in this way, one day, the presidential election will become an off-season election.
Yeah, he was trying to just suppose how that will happen. And that's because of the so many legal matters that comes after the elections.
And he talked about how it was a slim, narrow escape for him and, of course, our late beloved President Musa Yar'Adua. You know, that just one judge. If that judge had gone the other way, that election would have been repeated, and of course it would have become an off-season election because they were already in office.
But do you think we have loopholes that actually make us go back to the tribunal and then having some of this judgment in favor of other people that would disrupt the cycle of our election in Nigeria?
Without prejudice to the judiciary, there are a lot of loopholes in our Electoral Act, there are a lot of loopholes in our Constitution, and there are a lot of loopholes even from the judgment of the courts, the presidential, let's say the tribunals or the PEPT, or from Supreme Court or whatever. There are a lot of loopholes. Because there are times you take a look at the judgment, you know, holistically. I mean, I was privileged to participate in one colloquium where specific judgments, certain judgment, I don't want to mention the specific judgment, from the Supreme Court. That judgment came all the way from tribunal to Supreme Court, was looked at. So they looked at the case from the tribunal one by one, and there were judges there, justices, retired justices of the Supreme Court, and they faulted almost 80% of that judgment. And that judgment still subsists today. So sometimes you take a look at it, maybe one, the way the laws were couched is what gives room for the kind of judgment we have. For example, this Imo case, you know, there's a case still pending on the veracity of the Supreme Court judgment that brought in the incumbent governor of Imo State. The former governor who was ousted is still in court.
Emeka Ihedioha.
Yes. And Supreme Court has not ruled on that matter. 3 years after, 3.5 years after.
And then there's another election taking place.
And there's another election taking place. Just the way Peter Obi went to Supreme Court to interpret his tenure. And timeously at the time, the Supreme Court came out and said, after the election was held in Anambra State, I don't know if you recall, the election was held in 2007, and the governor then was Anduba. He was 2 weeks in office. I think he was in office for 17 days or thereabout. The Supreme Court held that there was no vacancy in the governorship seat of Anambra State, and that the election that took place, that INEC should have known better, that all the exercise by INEC and the election and the return is null and void, of no effect, that in the eyes of the law, it never happened. That's the judgment. I remember that particular section of the judgment because I was one of the key interested civil society organizations that were keen to know, because it was novel in our political jurisprudence for you to go to court to talk about your tenure, because people laughed it off at the time. Yes. And that was how that happened. So that Anduba was removed from office, Peter Obi returned and completed his tenure before the second term now happened in 2010. So that's why you have the Imo case. So it's also possible, it's possible, hypothetically, that at the end, return will be made. Whoever wins, the Supreme Court might come back tomorrow and say, oh, that they erred
in the judgment.
And reverse themselves. And somebody would have spent 4 years in office. Then the person who probably spent money campaigning, maybe another person wins, spends all the money, they reverse themselves, then they bring somebody else to come and complete That's exactly what I think the former president is trying to talk about. That we need to make sure.
Well, it goes back to the issue of us strengthening our judiciary.
Absolutely.
I believe it's very important that the judiciary is strengthening in all of this. But then, how realistic is the issue of, you know, some who have made the argument that before, you know, swearing in someone, all the petitions should have been decided in the courts? How realistic is it within the time frame that we have right now, and what will it require to do that?
Okay, so first off, if you recall, before the 2023 general elections, campaigns used to be within a span of 2 or 3 months. No, within 2 months. But for the 2023 election, campaigns happened for almost a year, if not more than a year. The same way we got to that point where candidates were able to campaign for such a long time to sell themselves and all that, just the way you have in the US election. Campaigns start 2 years before with the primary elections that goes across all states of the federation. I also believe that we can strengthen our electoral jurisprudence, you know, to the extent that as long as INEC is able to ensure that they are independent, you know, states can begin to handle, because the way it is today, elections are held at the state level, but conducted by the federal INEC. But in several countries across the world, you don't have a federal election management body. Okay, what you have is state management bodies who are independent, you know, largely independent. They conduct the elections, and of course they have their court system. Now, if we're able to give ourselves at least 1 year within the current judicial provisions, we can dispense with the electoral petitions before anybody is sworn in.
Some have even made the case that perhaps those who are disgruntled with the process should just go to the Supreme Court straight up and let the matter be decided once and for all without going through all the processes. But then we'll talk more on that. We have Asma'u Maikudi. She's from Yaga Africa Working Group member, who is joining us virtually now for an assessment of the situation. Thank you so much for joining us on this special coverage of the off-cycle election, Asma'u. Hello, can you hear me, Asma'u?
Yes, I can.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us on this special coverage. We want your assessment on the elections so far, from what you have observed and what the feelers you are getting from your observers in the various locations.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you, Mohammed. So far, we cannot really give a verdict. But what we are hearing from our observers in Kogi is that by 8:30 a.m., INEC has mobilized to over 50% of the polling units in the state. In Imo, it's not up to 50%, it's like 30 to 35%. But in Bayelsa, we don't have those figures yet. The only thing I can say is that INEC has really tried in the mobilization and the distribution of sensitive and the non-sensitive materials. But I also want to say that we are all aware also that some of the INEC staff, at least 12 of them that were in a boat, capsized. But we are so happy that all of them have survived. They were rescued by the good people of Bayelsa. So they have all survived, except that the materials, the result sheets and their sensitive materials are missing. They are deep into the sea, the ocean. But INEC has said that it's going to look into that issue, and it's in the process of making copies that will be made available so that the area will not be disenfranchised for whatever reason. I wish to commend the people of Bayelsa for doing that. And at the same time, I also want to call upon them to please protect the lives of ad hoc staff or everybody that is there doing a duty. These people are there to do a patriotic duty. And we learned that there's an unfortunate incident of abduction. A staff of INEC was abducted. That is not good. We are calling upon all the people in Imo, Bayelsa, and Kogi states to please help in ensuring that democracy thrives. Democracy is the way to go. And if people are abducted, people are harassed, people are intimidated, that's not a good environment for democracy to thrive. We want to call upon the people that abducted the INEC staff to please release the INEC staff. These people are there on a patriotic mission. But so far from the reports and the results we are seeing, we can say so far we are on the right track and we are good to go.
Okay, we are sorry about this development of an INEC staff being abducted in an election like this, where we're expecting zero from.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better.
Right. Well, so it's not a good development that a staff of INEC has been abducted, and we're just like you're appealing to everyone concerned, he should be released as soon as possible. But looking at the whole election right now, I know a state like Kogi has over 1 million voters that are expected to turn out for casting their vote today and choosing their next governor, and so applies to other electorate in Imo and Bayelsa states. From what you've gathered so far, has the level of turnout for electorates in Imo, Bayelsa, and of course Kogi state regarding this election, are we seeing a massive turnout in each of the states?
That is good news. We are receiving reports from our observers on the ground that there is a massive turnout. But it is too early to give a figure because, the elections are supposed to run until 2:30 p.m. or until the last person on the queue votes. So it's too early to give a figure. But so far what we are seeing and what we are hearing is that there is a massive turnout. This is very good. It shows that democracy has been accepted by the citizens of Nigeria. People who have collected their permanent voters card are ready to exercise their franchise. They are ready to vote. They are ready to elect their leaders. And that is a good information. But it's too early to give a figure now. It's too early to give a percentage. And we are keeping our fingers crossed until the end of the process. By 2:30, 3 p.m., we will be able to know.
All right. So are we expecting to see extension of time for some of those wards and polling units where deployment of election materials are not early enough? So, for instance, that location in Bayelsa State where we heard about boat capsizing, we know that there are more than 5,000 registered voters in that affected area. So to ensure that people are not disenfranchised at the end of the day, are we looking at, should we be expecting INEC to extend the voting time for such places where there are incidences and late arrival of election materials?
Well, INEC has always said that if for any reason elections do not start on time or they are stopped for whatever reason and INEC is at fault, INEC is going to make sure that it does the right thing. INEC is going to do the needful. So to answer your question, yes, I believe that INEC is going to extend the time in such areas. And we are also aware that I think it is in Imo, where the people, there are some local government there in Imo that the police refused to move on time. The INEC officials had to go on their own. This is not good enough. We expect INEC staff to be with security all the time. But in that local government, the police there refused to go with them until about 10:30 from the reports we received. But I'm happy to say that the police are with them right now. They joined them around 10:30 and they have security. But for whatever reason, if it is INEC's fault that elections do not start on time, INEC extends the time. But if it is due to other things that are not caused by INEC, then INEC has INEC decides whatever it should do. But yes, we are expecting an extension of time in the local government where the materials are in the sea. There are no result sheets. We're expecting an extended time in the local government where the police, the security refused to follow the INEC staff, but they have joined them. They couldn't go until around 10:30 when polls are supposed to be open by 8:30 a.m. We're expecting that INEC is going to extend the time in such places and other places that we are yet to receive information on.
All right. Okay, well, thank you so much, Asma'u Maikudi from Yaga Africa, member of the working group. We will be contacting you later for more updates on this.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, we now have Ajibade Praise as well, who is standing by for more with more updates for us from Imo State. Thank you so much, Ajibade, for standing by. Hello, Ajibade Praise. Can you hear me? All right. So it appears that we have a glitch there. We'll be connecting. We'll make all efforts to connect with Ajibade Praise for the updates. So from some of the information that we are seeing, the governor of Bayelsa State also casted his vote earlier on, but he was raising concern about, seeming intimidation of party agents. But let's see if we can get to Ajibade. Ajibade, can you hear me? Okay, very well. Thank you. Thank you so much. So talk to us about the situation in Imo State where you are right now. I'm sure when we spoke to you earlier, it was like about 3 or 2 hours earlier. But what do we have now at the moment?
Okay, at the moment, voting has commenced, though electoral officers have arrived late, but then voting has commenced as we speak now, and the electorate are actually eager to cast their votes, and they've been doing that one after another. One interesting thing is that aged women and men took out a mass to equally cast their vote as well, and a preferential treatment, I would say, was given to some of them, as the electoral officers actually asked that the young ones to allow them cast their vote first, and which they did, and it went smoothly. The Beaver's functionality is, to an extent, I would say, 95%, because there is no delay at all. Within 1 to 2 minutes thereabout, a voter cast his or a vote without any delay. And also, the candidate of the PDP, whose polling unit is this place where I am standing, has also cast his vote successfully, even though there was some initial trouble. There was some initial, I would say, tension caused by certain persons who were trying to hijack electoral officers as well as electoral materials. These men came in with an empty vehicle trying to force the electoral officers and their materials into a particular vehicle. The people around the electorate around actually raised alarm to that effect, and the police were able to come promptly and arrest the situation.
Okay, it's good to know that some people already cast their votes, and we also see that women are actually on the queue, and it's resonating in all other the other 2 states, which is a good development. Tell us about the turnout now. Did people come out en masse to exercise their franchise? Probably could put it in ratio for us, the younger people, the older people, and in men and women. Just give us a sense of how this is turning out.
Well, this one has compared to the initial year, we had
Ajibade Praise, it appears that we are having issues with your sound. Yes, we have a problem hearing you. The audio seems to be very bad. Perhaps we would try to see if we can get a better audio quality. Yeah. All right. Well, we've heard there already. We are seeing elements of, violence that is likely to happen. Usually when it starts in the morning, like we said earlier, it's usually very peaceful and calm. until later part of the day when you begin to hear when results are being collated and so on. Now, from the Asma'u Maikudi, the member of the Yaga Africa Working Group, we understand that in Imo State, only 35% of the polling units officials arrived early, in only 35% of the polling units, in about 50% of the polling units. So that's quite low, if we are to go by that number. What is likely the cause of this in your observation?
Same thing, logistics. INEC is yet to get the best form of logistics for deployment of electoral materials on the election day.
Despite all the efforts to deploy as early as possible, we know that deployments commenced almost 72 hours before the election.
There could be efforts to deploy, but the efforts might be futile because the strategy is wrong.
Okay, so why do we keep having these problems, especially in riverine areas? Like you mentioned, INEC is still finding it foot trying to distribute these materials the proper way. Is it, business as usual, or there's something, we're not being told? I'm very optimistic about how materials are distributed in other parts of the country, and then when it comes to these riverine areas, and then things like this happen. Do you think that there's something INEC could have done better to actually make this a little less cumbersome than it is right now?
Absolutely. There is nothing under the surface of the earth that does not have solution. Anything that appears to be a problem has solution. The question is, what type of solution are you seeking? Are you seeking an enduring solution? Are you seeking solutions that will permanently take care of it?
When you say Nigerian solutions, a lot of people might want to ask.
Unfortunately, you reported a particular local government in Kogi State, where I think the electoral, either the REC or electoral officer was able to, they talked about a particular local government that will take about 8 hours to get to. So if you deploy materials in the morning of the election, 8 hours means what? 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. The day is over.
Yeah, but they started much earlier.
So they started much earlier.
He was
exactly.
making.
So they started much earlier to do the deployment. So the deployment happened properly. And so they started early. So if you have such situation in Imo State, for example, and you know that situation is there, but you chose not to be proactive in finding ways to ensuring that that material is there by 8 a.m. in the morning and voting will start, then, I don't know what to tell you.
Is it with the distribution? Because, it's one thing to deploy to the area.
Yes. There is another thing to
distribute the material.
So most often when you hear INEC explanation is that, that the National Union of Road Transport Workers, whom over every year or every time there's an election, disrupt the distribution either by providing dilapidated vehicles that can't go the distance, or there are no fuel, or there's always one funny, inexcusable.
We've heard from Asma'u how that police officers in one instance were refusing to go with the agents, with the officials, INEC ad hoc officials and so on. Have we taken care of that angle in terms of, because I can imagine that some will decide not to move because perhaps they will make the case that their allowances have not been paid and so on. We've had such stories before.
Sure.
So what can we even say about those kind of instances?
Well, I was hoping that you will press her further, because Asma'u Maikudi used to be resident electoral commissioner with INEC, right? So she's got practical field experience when it comes to elections. I'm not quite sure if she was deployed to a state with an off-season election. Probably her experience was limited to the general election, which, across the entire state, you are the only rep in your state to manage the activities besides one or two, one national commissioner that will be deployed to your state to support your activity. So I was hoping that you would have pressed her a little more to get more insight. Maybe they were able to get more information. Otherwise, I mean, what has been her own personal experience while she was a wreck? How were they able to solve the issue of non-payment of allowance either by the security agencies and their refusal to either
We'll definitely connect with her again to get all of those information.
The reality is that we vote billions, hundreds of billions to INEC for election, whatever the election is. These funds are given the highest level of priority in recent years, right? So it's not as if, oh, the money is not there or the money didn't come. I even remember that the last election, the Central Bank of Nigeria provided raw cash to INEC. So there's no excuse of, oh, we transferred the money, didn't go. But still, every time you hear, oh, monies were not paid to the transporters, so the transporters refused to work, or the monies came late, police were not giving money, they didn't eat last night, or they didn't have a place to sleep.
Accommodation,
Some funny, clumsy excuses, you know.
All right, let's connect with Jonathan Awaya. He's in Bayelsa State, the mainland in Bayelsa, for some more updates. Thank you, Jonathan. And how are you coping with the stress?
I'm fine. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. So what's the development right now in Bayelsa State at the mainland?
Come again, please.
So what's the recent development in Bayelsa at the mainland? We understand that you have been on the mainland in Bayelsa monitoring the exercise there. What's the situation?
That's right. Here, voting commenced at about 9 a.m., even though the voters came out a bit too early. At about 7:15 a.m., some voters had arrived at the polling unit. As we speak, I am at Kolo 1, Unit 1 at Obia local government, and voting is ongoing.
All right. So we understand that the governor, Doyodiri, has casted his vote, and he was raising some concerns about some fracas, if you like, between party agents of the APC and PDP. What can you tell us about that?
Come again, please.
We understand that
we have a bit of network.
Doyodiri has casted his vote there in Bayelsa State, and from his address while he was speaking to members of the press after casting his vote, he raised some concerns about little fracas between members of the PDP agents and that of the APC, stopping them and so on. What can you tell us about
that? So far, I have not seen any fracas myself in areas I have visited. I just left Yenegua. I'm in another local government, Obia. So far, no fracas. But he's in a different local government, and I cannot exactly say the true position there.
Okay, so in terms of security presence, what's the arrangement like where you are? People have talked about, the presence of security personnel, and how effective do you think they are right now from what you are seeing?
Okay, the security architecture is, I would say, commendable. So far, we have a lot of security presence in Yenegua and Obia local government.
So what's the turnout like? You talked about some of the electorate came out a bit too early. Does that mean that we're seeing a lot of, or a massive turnout for this election?
Yeah, I would say yes, because so far, some persons I interviewed said they are impressed with the turnout of voters. And for me, it's massive.
Much for that information and keeping us updated with what's happening in the mainland in Bayelsa State. If need be, we'll connect with you again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.
All right. Well, it looks like excited voters there, arriving at the polling units quite early, earlier than expected, 7:15 or thereabouts. And so, but it turns out that where you have early arrival of voters and then late arrival of INEC officials, that does a lot to demoralizing, the voters in those places, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that there's, this serious enthusiasm amongst voters. But I wouldn't even say that voters coming before 8 a.m., between 7 and 8 is early, because if the polling unit or the polling area is one with large voting population, you will do well to come pretty early. Otherwise, you'll be on the queue for a very long time. I remember during the presidential election in my own polling unit, in Abuja, I was there by 7:30. By the time I got there, there were over 100 people there. Yeah. So what time did they arrive? And of course, polling was supposed to open at 8 a.m. or 8:30 at best. So if you put that into consideration, I think it's exciting to hear that even in amidst the euphoria of lack of interest and all that as a result of whatever skirmishes that people perceive with the 2023 general election, people are still interested in casting their ballot and choosing their leader, the leader of their choice. I'm really happy to hear that. But of course, at the end of the day, we will be able to hear what is the percentage of turnout, that then we'll be able to judge whether we have, because you can have massive, like we had, in 2023 election, we assumed we had massive turnout. But at the end of the day, the percentage was very dismal.
Yes.
Many areas where voting were cancelled, in many areas where people had PVCs but they couldn't vote for whatever reason. I'm not sure INEC has addressed those issues. They don't need to address it to us. Address with those guys who were disenfranchised for whatever reason they had. And in addition, I don't know how much INEC is also using National Orientation Agency and other government agencies to mobilize people, those that are yet to collect their PVCs to come and collect their PVC, or those that transfer their PVC who are yet to collect their PVC to collect, and those who had temporary voters card to go and also go get their PVC, because it's important these activities continue. There shouldn't just be 1 month or 3 months to the election, then we'll have this.
All right, so let's take this report that we're seeing from one of our correspondents who is in Yenagoa. We have a correspondent in Yenagoa reporting that suspected armed thugs have invaded polling units in southern Ijaw and Shagbama local government areas with heavy gunshots and hijack of election materials. The report said that at about 9 a.m. at Agorogbene Unit 6, 7 and 8 in Ward 11 of the local government, suspected thugs from southern Ijaw chased away voters and destroy election materials. Attempts by the electorate to challenge the armed men were replied with heavy gunshots. Also around 9 a.m. the armed thugs stormed the rack center and carted away election materials for 5 out of the 7 units. Now at Ogea Diama Ward 9 in Unit 14 of Southern Ijaw local government area, gunmen stormed the unit but were repelled after an emergency call to security men. Sporadic gunshots were also reported to have been heard around the Abuja Mbikiri area of Brass Ward 2, and at about 3:30 a.m. on Saturday, gunmen suspected to be political thugs attacked the rack center in Oginigbiri in Brass Ward 8, but they were resisted. So these are some of the stories. The police is yet to confirm this report, this incident at the moment, but these are the feelers we're getting already from Yenagoa in Bayelsa State. It appears that the drama is beginning to is beginning to happen.
Yeah, I would have been surprised if Sabama doesn't come up.
So, don't you think that prior to the elections, there've been a sound warning from security agents that you shouldn't try anything, or you get double of the trouble that you're trying to make? Why do we still have some of these elements? I understand that, regardless of whatever the security agents will say, some scrupulous elements will also spring up with this. But don't you think that, this warning was stern enough for them to keep up?
The stakes, is usually, pushed so high with this political office. I mean, if, for example, I would digress a little bit. If, for example, you run for office and you do not need to spend your personal money, you don't need to sell your house, your land, to run for Senate, House of Reps, and you do, and you win. And to welcome you, you get an XUV 2024 model worth 160 million, just one vehicle, in the midst of several others that will come within 1 month of being in office. Or you become a governor and you are you're going to be in control of a budget, annual budget of between 300 million to 500 million or 1 trillion. You will do everything humanly possible to get it. So it's because the stakes are so high and there are almost no consequence. Because over time, in the general election that happened in February and March, there were over 100 electoral offenders that were arrested. Till today, we don't have anything on them. Some of them may have been forgiven. Some of them may have been released under very funny circumstances. So that is the truth. And because politicians are desperate to get to office, they will use anything possible. Many politicians do not like it when there is heavy deployment of security. They don't, because it will prevent them from doing what they want to do. Some don't even care whether you have heavy deployment or you don't have heavy deployment. Sabama is one of the hot areas, within Bayelsa State. So I would have been shocked. Sabama is where the former governor, Dixon, is from. And the reality is that the stakes are high. Don't forget we have a former PDP member who was a commissioner in the state under Labour Party. We also have, a number of other candidates who were hitherto. So it's one family that spread across several, so they know each other, they understand each other, they know their strength. So when you notice that, in this area, if you are allowed to come back, it's over for you. So you must disrupt that place. That's what's going on.
So we know we can identify some of these flashpoints.
Yes.
But I also expect the security agents, of course, they did what they can, but more of this deployment should have been concentrated in some of these places. Did you think that there's something maybe in the state that has prevented a lot of security agents concentrated in this red spot?
I mean, I want to give kudos to the security agent, because from the report you revealed that there were, in certain places they were repelled. Yes. In some areas they were not repelled. They
carted away with 5 out of 7.
Yeah, probably in the Iraq area, we didn't have a situation where they responded faster. Maybe they were, trying to take care of another location, because these political talks can, create diversions or distraction. So they may have been distracted somewhere, whereas the intention is Iraq. So the security agencies will go that way. When the Iraq now begin to have, before they come to that place, it will be late. So I want to give kudos to the security agents, but they can do much more. They can do really much more,
All right. We're also getting reports about a fake result that has gone into circulation while voting is still ongoing.
We're expecting something like that. It happened during the general election. So,
yes, a civil society organization, Yaga Africa, had raised alarm over the discovery of election results from polling units 004 any ward of Ogori, Mangogo area of Kogi State. The fourth result was seen, while voters were still in the queue. In fact, it's even showing that the APC polled 200 votes, AA scored 1 vote, while ADC, PDP, and SDP got 2 votes each. Wow. You can imagine that kind of, but INEC is saying that it is investigating that result in circulation. It must be fake. Otherwise, how is it that elections are still ongoing and then result is already out there? and also it's very important to investigate that, and we'll continue to keep tab on that. We've had such issues in the past where people will say, well, elections were never conducted in a particular polling unit, but results
came
were
out
manufactured, somehow.
Yeah, we had that
in all
issue.
of that. Does INEC has a way of knowing that this result is not authentic? If there were no elections in a particular polling unit, how do we get, to see results from that same polling unit, and how do we get to accept that?
There are rules of engagement. Who sets the rules? INEC. INEC, the law empowers INEC. INEC is like a court. Not like a court. INEC has quasi-judicial powers. Because INEC can cancel election. INEC can uphold an election. INEC can review an election result and procedure. The Act gives INEC 7 days to review. So INEC has enormous powers. So let me give you a case in point. Back to Adamawa State. There were results that came out between Binani and Fintiri. INEC had to review them. And when they reviewed them, they now decided to do a supplementary election. During the supplementary election, collation was still ongoing before the REC went to do that that movie for us. INEC had to stamp their foot down to say, no, this cannot happen.
Yes.
That's because you follow the rules. 2, Abia State, a particular local government that had 120-something thousand voters. Results had come in. And the result that came in showed a particular number. But they changed the result and increased certain political parties because the other party was leading by, I think, 40-something thousand votes. So they increased it on this other side. The returning officer said, no, we need to go back to the IREV. That's the importance of IREV. It happened in several states. Adamawa case, IREV was used as well. In several other local government, senatorial elections. But there are also certain senatorial elections where voting was still ongoing. Results were announced and the judiciary upheld that election.
So we hope that this will not happen this time around in this election. We hope to see the end of this investigation by INEC as regards this particular result that is now circulating, on the social media space.
Yeah.
We'll take a short break. Let's take a short break now, and then when we return, the discussions and analysis will continue, and we'll continue to bring you all the feelers from the field. Please stay with us.
Please, let's, please, Stop, guys! Stop! What is your problem now? Why are you doing like this? What do they worry? Guy, look, check that.
I also want to thank God for their privilege to come for this second contest. And I again want to use the opportunity to thank the party and the governor who nominated me as his running mate, because it's not my right, it's a privilege. So I want to thank them. Again, I want to thank Bayelsans for the 4 years of massive support and solidarity. And finally, I want to thank the people of the Foni community who have always been behind me, the solid rock behind me, like the Rock of Gibraltar. And you can see how massive the people are here. You know, even the presidential elections and the National Assembly elections, the turn-up was not as much as this. And I told you people that because it was not my election, I know this, there's always emotion and sentiment to politics everywhere it is. So we have seen a massive turnout. So we thank Annex also for the process so far, but we are concerned about what is happening in Nembe and a few other places. We pray that the security agencies and all the other agencies involved will do the right thing so that people should not be disenfranchised. Election is a ballot affair, not a bullet affair. All of them have 6 as their letters, but that doesn't mean that they are the same words. Bullet and ballot have 6 letters, but it doesn't mean that they're the same words. So people should make it a civic responsibility, not a military responsibility. So I want to encourage the Bayelsa people, the Nembe people, who have always had this cliche. For every electoral circle, there's always a violence in Nembe. I think they are becoming a little bit too kind a name for them to bear. So we want to plead with all the actors and actresses, because it's not only actors, the actresses there. They should shield the sword and allow peace to reign. We are confident that we are going to close to victory, because the candidate of the other party have actually wanted to tell us. He was here for 5 years, and all we could hear is that I will do again. He said,
first, let me congratulate the 3 states that have elections today: Bayelsa State, Imo State, and Kogi State, and which all these states successful elections, peaceful conduct of elections. But basically, because this is an off-season election, and I get worried about the issue of off-season elections. And I will use this unique opportunity to plead with the National Assembly that we need to block this off-season election. It's very odd, it's not a global best practice. A country can elect their people at different times, like America. Some countries, they may not elect everybody at the same time. But any time they go on to conduct their election, they elect everybody that's supposed to be elected. If we continue with this trend of off-season elections, based on the interpretation of our laws by the judicial officer, it will come to a time that the presidential election in Nigeria may be off-season. Probably that's the time that all of you media people and others should be worried. Look at the American system. Everybody knows when the American elections will be conducted. That's standard practice in other countries. And when I say presidential election in Nigeria may be off-season one day, some people may get say, why, how? It almost happened in 2007. I contested as a running mate to late President Yar'Adua. You know that election, the 7 judges that presided over the case, 3 of them, in their own judgment, that the election be annulled. 4 of them sustained the election, and that is why we stayed. If one has crossed over, by now the presidential election in Nigeria would have been off-season election, and it is not the best. for a country. And there's easy things to do to make sure that other states, now we have 7 states that are off-season. We need to stop there. And where possible, these 7 states too can be migrated back to fall in line with the other states. And the National Assembly can do that. That is my message for the National Assembly, my message for Nigerians today. On the other hand, I wish the election successful. I've been monitoring what is happening in Bayelsa State. I almost ask people across the local governments, and for now, no major things that we will get worried, apart from the part of Nembe local government, the Basambri part of Nembe local government that have been in conflict for quite some time before the election. Apart from that, I think the elections are going on well, but we cannot conclude until at the end of the voting period.
Yes, and that was former President Goodluck Jonathan after he cast his vote there alongside his wife, Patience Jonathan, who we haven't seen in a very long time in the public glare. Today she's there accompanying her her husband, and also probably, casting her own votes too. Well, this is the special coverage of the off-cycle elections in the year 2023 in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi State. Quite a number of issues we've been looking at there. We have in the studio Emmanuel Osemeka, a public affairs analyst and also a member of the civil society organizations, and talking about what has been happening over the course of the campaigns and even today, and what we're expecting to see at the end of this election. 5 million people are deciding to filling the governorship seats of the various states, Imo, Kogi, and Bayelsa State. And we know that about 18 political parties are contesting in this election. So it's quite keen, I would say, contest, if you like. And a lot of people are watching with interest to see how it all pans out and how all the major players will play their role. INEC, the police, and all the political actors in the race. So it's been an interesting journey. If we may put up the top contenders in the various states, we have in Bayelsa State, for instance, we have the major contenders. The current governor, Doye Diri, he is contesting for re-election in the state under the platform of the People's Democratic Party. You also have in the All Progressives Congress, Timipre Silva, former minister, and also Udeng's Eradiri. He is candidate of the Labour Party in the state. A total of 1.1 million registered voters for the election, even though only 1 million collected their PVCs. And so we are hoping to see how that will pan out at the end of the day. In Kogi State, we have the major contenders as Dino Melai of the People's Democratic Party. He is the flag bearer for that party in the election, and also Malam Ahmed Ododo of the APC, who is now considered the anointed candidate of the incumbent governor, the current governor in Kogi State, Yahaya Bello, if you like. Also the candidate of the SDP, Social Democratic Party, Murtala Ajaka, and the ADC candidate Leke Bejide, who is also been, I would say, springing up surprises in the process. In Imo State now, in Imo State we have Hope Uzodinma, the current governor, who is seeking re-election in the state under the platform of the All Progressives Congress, and also Senator Samuel Anyao of the People's Democratic Party, and Senator Ethan Chonu. He is also the candidate of the Labour Party. And coincidentally, probably they are all senators.
Yes.
It's looking more and more as if our politics is tilting towards former senators going into the executive to become governors, or governors going into the legislative chambers.
It's just a vicious circle.
So it's like, going round circles.
Unfortunately.
Is it unfortunately or
Yes.
unfortunately? Because some people will talk about experience of governance as, something that counts.
In civil society, we say you don't reinforce failure. And I think in military as well. A lot of activities of the civil society, especially in the humanitarian response, we derive the word humanitarian response from the military balance. The military call it operations. We will call it humanitarian because ours is humanitarian, while theirs is, kinetic. Now, in the military, you don't reinforce failure. If the governors did so well, they will not run for Senate.
Really?
Yes. I will give you a classical
example. Some of the things that we've heard is that there are people who are calling on them to contest,
I agree.
For the elections, given how they have performed.
But we're not the one the people were calling
outstandingly.
We're not the one the people were calling them. If the people are calling you to run for office, you wouldn't need to be desperate to win the election, because the people will vote for you. The people will go out to defend the vote. A case in point is the young man in the House of Representatives from Imo State, Ikenga Ugochinyere. That young man never campaigned in Imo State because of the challenges he had, the running battles he had in the state with the opposition. But he won landslide. His house was destroyed, burnt down, people were sent to kidnap him. All kinds of things happened. The people voted for him. He was not in the state when the election took place. He didn't even campaign in the state. That's a classical example of somebody who the people wanted. The other example is the Abia State governor, whom when he was declared winner eventually, the state went up in celebration. That's another classical example of someone the people wanted. We can continue, we can go on and on and on to, cite example of people who the state wanted. There are people who won election in their state as governor or state that the people are so sad that the person won. So the question is, who voted for you? So the truth is, what has happened over time is that we are, just like we talked about earlier, our leadership recruitment system is faulty. So we don't throw up our best. We throw up the
who has the money
the
most.
people with the deepest pocket. So you find out that at the end of the day, our best brains don't go out to bring the best for the benefit, for the good of the majority. So there's no reason why. Look at me. I'm 52 years old. Look at the level of gray hair that I have. This came after 8 years as country director of an organization. Before then, you can count maybe 1 or 2 strands. But today, look at me. When you function properly, maximally, intellectually, for the benefit of the people, it will tell on you. In fact, you wouldn't want to go back. You'll be tired. You'll be spent. When last did you see Obama? When last did you see Obama, President Obama? Is he up to 60 yet?
Yes, yes.
He's about 60. But you could see the toll on him from that office. When President Goodluck Jonathan left office, did you see how he looked? Do you see him after 8 years? He's looking younger and better. Because the truth is, when you were in that office and you are functional, the office will drain you. You can't be drained after 4 years and 8 years and you want another 4 years or 8 years. It's not possible. It's not possible.
Well, what if, you have passionate people who, are very patriotic and are willing to go all out.
I agree. The more passionate people you have, the more tasking the responsibility, because those passionate people will come up with all manner of things before you. Yours is to decide which is the best with their advice. except if you supposedly have passionate people, and once they bring executive summary for you and say, "Oga, sign here," you just sign. So you're not there to think, you're there to just append your signature. That's the difference. When a man functions, so I use myself as an example. 8 years as country director of an NGO that functioned within the humanitarian space. After 5 years, I couldn't recognize myself. That's the truth. And after that 8 years, I did 3 surgeries this year, 3 spine surgeries. The toll on public thrust will drain you, except you're not there to work for the people, because you will sit in long hours of meetings, strategic meetings, deliberations, policy decisions, implementation, monitoring, evaluation. Then, come on.
No, let's take
it's not something you want to enjoy for 16 years.
Let's take a look at, the dimension and
Yes.
dynamism in this off-season election. For a state like Imo State, a lot of people have attributed it to the Supreme Court governor that was chosen for them. And now we're heading to the polls now. A lot of people are anticipating that we don't get to that space anymore. How can we actually deal with the situation where the voice and the choice of the people remains at the end of the day?
So it all goes back to the same thing we're talking about. Public trust or elective positions, or whatever you may call it, is so that you can hold political power for the good of the people, for the good of the majority at least. But what has happened over time is that people are elected, or in Nigerian case, like we usually say, selected, and at the end of the day, they still do not have the understanding that you are there to use the resources of the state for the good of majority. So you see people, you see them, you know how poor they were or how average they were. 4 years in office, they are the richest people. How? How much is your salary? That's why Senator Ndume was on television the other day saying that the president should sign an executive order mandating that people should explain, to begin to explain what he termed as unexplained wealth. Because there are too many unexplained wealth running around the country. So the truth is, when people elect you, the people will support you freely. You don't even need, when you go on the street, it's celebration. Forgive me, the Adamawa State governor is working for the place. When I went back to Adamawa State, I couldn't recognize the place anymore. That's the man they called the ATM, because he sent the entire state to the ATM. He came in and paid 2.5 years salary that was held, that was not, that the former governor at the time, Muritala Nyako, was not able to pay. So, then the banks were not really functioning, so they were using ATM. So they changed Fintiri's name, then he was the Speaker of the State Assembly. They changed his name to ATM.
Yes.
Today, you could see that the young man is making deliberate efforts to work for the people. 2, go to Abia State. You had governors who spent 8 years. They couldn't fix 2.5 kilometers in Aba. The governor of Abia State today, because he knows the people voted for him, without the people he wouldn't have been governor. He has fixed 8 of that road, 8 roads in 5 months.
So there's a correlation between earning the votes
Yes.
and performance.
Performance, correct. When you know the people voted for you, you will work for the people, because you know that the next election, without them, you are nobody. And our elections are going towards that direction. That is why it's important that we also look at those loopholes that is causing all these shenanigans. In my view, the reason for the massive deployment at the INEC level and at the security level is to forestall people maximizing this loophole. It doesn't mean that they will not try, but when you forestall it to a very large extent, you strangulate where it's being fed from.
All right, well, thank you so much, Emmanuel Osemeka, Public Affairs Analyst and also member of the Civil Society Organization. Thank you for joining this special coverage and giving all the perspectives and analysis on the off-cycle elections.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
All right. Now, we will be taking a breather now, and then top of the hour at 12, we'll be taking the news updates. We have Sahir Ibrahim coming up for that, and then shortly we would go back to our live coverage and also bring you all the special analysis on the off-cycle elections. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for staying and watching. Please do not change the channel yet. We are not done.
All right, my name is Mardia Umar. Like Ayuba said, we're still here. Stay tuned for the news at 12. Stay with us.